We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stone.
Am I going to get sued?
Are we going legal on this?
I like football season, and all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL Podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live here on YouTube for our Wednesday afternoon show. Of course, Wednesdays can be all over the place. All sorts of fun here today. Most importantly, we get to see if Sam hits 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, got a little video that we will end the show with later on. Play it out. Maybe we'll throw the video up on its own YouTube video afterwards, like we did with the first one. But yes, video evidence of the baseball endeavor will be later in the show.
We're also going to have former NFL defensive lineman Seth Payne on the show to preview Philadelphia Eagles, Houston Texans, maybe also touch on a little bit of Phillies, Astros, touch on the World Series, of course. But even more importantly for me, this is the very first late 90s Jaguar to join the podcast, to become a friend of the show. And I'm very excited to have Seth on here. You know, it's always good to have, a starting defensive lineman from the late 90s Jaguars join the show here.
Always.
Yeah. Since, Mark Brunell turned us down and everything. But, it's good to have Seth here.
Well, the problem with the Mark Brunell thing is you met him, That put us way behind the eight ball right from the start.
Yeah, and he was busy.
I mean, it was always going to be a struggle from that point.
He was over there, trying to meet up with Kevin O'Connell and, very, very busy around the combine. But we shook hands and took a picture. Might be the extent of my Mark Brunell interactions, but it's good to have Seth here. We're also going to go through yesterday's trade deadline. We did have an instant reaction on the PFF NFL Daily already, but we got to go through the madness that was the trade deadline in the NFL.
Yeah, and it actually was. It's becoming more like the NBA. It's not, it's one of those things that the NFL has kind of tried to turn into an event for years, or just the nature of instant news and Twitter and all the hype, and it's like, oh, it's a trade deadline, and then nothing happens. Like a couple of really inconsequential players get moved for inconsequential picks, and you're like, okay. But actually, big things were happening yesterday.
Well, let's get right into it. Let's get right into that. And we'll have Explain the Grade as well. We'll do some Explain the Grade. So let's get right into the trade deadline. What do you have any initial high-level thoughts? I mean, I guess that is the high-level thought, right? The fact that teams are saying, we're going to, quote-unquote, go for it. Other teams are saying, we're going to move to the future. You mentioned the NBA. Major League Baseball has a ton of trade deadline activity, but it's easier for baseball because they have a minor league system, right? And the general tenor of that, up to the deadline is you give up the future, you give up your, minor league players for major league players, right? And it's like you have buyers and sellers. The NFL is less clear cut. It's in a parity-driven league. Teams that are 3-5 or 4-4 still probably feel like they've got playoff aspirations. And the future is draft picks. And draft picks are, generally held pretty close to the vest for a lot of teams. But I think we are seeing teams open up a little bit more and really try to pursue players over picks.
I think it's just very complicated in the NFL because you have a few different things at play. You have, okay, are you trying to win now? Are you trying to win in the future? And then are you trying to win now? How much are you willing to sacrifice to win now? Because, we were talking upstairs about the late 90s Jags, the early 2000s Texans, and at that stage, they knew with the salary cap, teams didn't really know what the hell they were doing. And there were a bunch of teams that were legitimately in salary cap hell for several years because of incompetence, essentially.
They couldn't get out of it. Right. They didn't know how to.
In a way that simply doesn't happen anymore, right? A bunch of teams back then were what everybody thinks the New Orleans Saints are now every year, which is, the Saints are in salary cap hell. Look at how many millions they're over the cap. It's like, yeah, but because they're going to clear all that. They're going to pay off the credit card, and then they're going to re-up. Like, this is how the Saints do it. They're never in salary cap hell. This is just how they treat the salary cap. So, now teams are all good enough with the salary cap that very rarely is a team in legitimate salary cap trouble. Now, they might be close enough against the cap that they can't make one specific large move, but nobody is sitting here in just a salary cap nightmare where they're going to have to strip down the roster to nothing, purge it, start over completely. Even teams like the Bears, like they were up against the salary cap, but they weren't like, we have to blow up this entire team, otherwise we can't even function next year financially. They just stripped it down because that's the easiest and most efficient way of building it back up. But the late 90s and the early 2000s, there were teams absolutely in salary cap hell. So now, I don't think anybody is in that much danger of like, let's just completely mortgage the future. Like, to hell with years 2, 3, 4, and 5. We will settle through 5 years where we don't win a game because this is the year. Like, we're winning a championship now. Nobody's acting that way. So it's a much more delicate balance between how much of the future are you willing to give up, how much sort of lack of value are you willing to have in this trade because you get better right now. It's a sort of interesting, balance between all these trades.
So one of the teams that is going for it, that is being aggressive, Miami Dolphins, bringing in Bradley Chubb for a first-round pick next year, also a fourth-round pick. They give up a fourth-round pick and also Chase Edmonds, running back. Mm-hmm. They get Bradley Chubb and a fifth-round pick back in 2025 from the Broncos. But Bradley Chubb coming into a Dolphins team that is already, they're number 9, in pass rush grade so far this season. And the on-paper edge rusher depth chart for the Dolphins is loaded. You've got Jalen Phillips in year 2, who's really developing and has been really good this season. Andrew Van Ginkel, who's got a history of rushing the passer pretty well. Melvin Ingram, a veteran that they brought in on the cheap like other teams have done and have gotten good play out of. And Emmanuel Ogbah, who they just re-upped for over $16 million a year this offseason. He has largely not been productive this year. That looks like a bad overpay so far because he was coming off a career year. But they already had 4 guys. Now, Ogbah's moving around, playing inside, whatever, but they brought Chubb in to be that next guy. Chubb's in the middle of his own career year. He's never been an elite pass rusher, despite some thinking he was Myles Garrett-esque coming out of college. He's been a good, solid player who's had some durability issues for the Broncos, but it's an aggressive move for the Dolphins, a team that's relying more on their pass rush this year than they have in years past because they're playing a little bit more zone, needing to win with their front four. But what were your initial reactions to Chubb for a first-round pick, by the way, where Miami has now forfeited their own pick, traded the other pick that they got from the Niners, right? Yeah. From the Niners, and now they have no more first-rounders.
Their only first-round pick, essentially, because of the tampering missteps, shall we say. This is the most interesting trade to me because it's a good example of what I was just talking about. In theory, from Miami's point of view, I like this trade the least because of the cost they gave up to make it happen, the fact that they're going to have to pay him significant money when they've already got guys like Ogbah on the hook, et cetera, et cetera. We'll get to the reasons in a minute. But the bottom line being, Bradley Chubb makes them reasonably significantly better this year and absolutely materially makes a difference to their chances of winning a Super Bowl right now, and I think it's not a coincidence that Buffalo had Von Miller largely because he makes a difference to whether or not they can beat the Chiefs. That's what everybody's shooting for. Miami, they know they can beat Buffalo because they already did it. Weird game a little bit, but still, they are looking at the same thing and saying, well, we need to figure out how to beat the Chiefs and the Bills in the playoffs because that's what's going to happen if they get that far. And a guy like Bradley Chubb makes a difference to that. He will help in that endeavor. The only question is it worth what you had to give up to make that happen? And that's where I think it gets a little bit more debatable. But this is why, every single trade that happened yesterday, in not one of them is there a massive glaring winner and an idiot team. Every single one of them, you can at least understand and make an argument for why the quote-unquote losing team did what they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're describing is not so much win-wins, but just different strategies. I have to stay consistent here because the historic strategy of taking a first-round pick who's due his fifth-year option or is due to get paid and flipping him for a first-round pick, I think over time is outstanding business. So from the Broncos' perspective, other teams, I think it's outstanding business. And it's not that I don't like Bradley Chubb as a player. I think he's solid. But if you look at what he's actually returned on the field, using PFF WAR, he's never been better than 28th in the NFL. WAR is a volume-driven stat, so the injuries kind of baked into that. He's had 2 years where he's had very limited time on the field. And like I said, he's never been elite as a pass rusher or as a run defender. He's been better in both this year. But he was supposed to be this like hammer against the run who's a good pass rusher. And he hasn't been that.
I mean, I think he's a guy who I think was overrated as a draft prospect.
Right.
So
there was a big debate. He goes number 5 overall in 2018. There was a big debate about the Browns taking him at 4. They took Denzel Ward instead. I think that was the right move. But him going at 5 felt a little inflated even at that time.
Yeah, he was always a good rather than a great pass rusher, even at the college level when you're comparing him to some of these other top prospects. And then you add in all the injuries that he's had in the NFL level, and this is by far the best season of his career. If you're looking to paint an optimistic picture, you'd be like, well, it's the first time he's been healthy. This is the real Bradley Chubb. Like, this is who you're going to get going forward. I mean, number one, I would say that's a fairly optimistic outlook of the whole thing. But number two, even this year, it's not that good. He leads the team in sacks, right, with 6. So if you're of the inclination that believes sacks is all you need to pay attention to for an edge rusher, fine. He also leads them in pressures, but that's because he has by far the most pass rushes.
He's been good.
I would argue he's the 3rd most effective Denver edge rusher this year.
On a per-play basis.
Yes. He's been less effective than Randy Gregory. He's been less effective than Baron Browning. His pass rush win rate is like half either of those guys. When you look at it on a per-snap basis, even his pressure rate is lower than those other two guys.
But I don't think we need to, downgrade his performance this year. Bradley Chubb has been good. That's fine.
Right, but we need to, but good is not great. Let's be clear about what we're talking about here. Is that even the most optimistic outlook of Bradley Chubb, you're getting a good player. You're not getting a great one.
Now, so from the Broncos' perspective, the other deals that have happened in the past that I've liked was the 49ers trading DeForest Buckner before they had to pay him to the Colts, and then for a first-round pick. Now, they haven't directly replaced DeForest Buckner yet, but I think we've seen them essentially get their defensive line up to comparable when they're healthy, right? And they would have had a money issue with Buckner and Bosa and Armstead. They couldn't sign everybody. So I liked that as a deal. You get 4 years of first-round service time out of a guy. You flip him for a somewhat equivalent first-round pick. Now, this won't be an equivalent number 5 overall pick here.
Right.
But I think this works out for the Broncos in the long term. And for the Dolphins, it's intriguing to see the fact that they have 5 guys that you would call edge rushers that you can move around, create some havoc up front, and rush the passer. But it's a go-for-it move for the Dolphins. These are go-for-it moves because they're going to have to pay Chubb. Presumably, they're going to have to pay him as well on the back end.
I love this move from a Denver perspective because I don't think they should have paid him, even if they kept him going forward. If he had the finishes this year the way he's playing this year, I don't think you should pay him the money he's going to be due next year anyway. So you would be letting him walk. Okay, you get the compensatory draft pick. So is half a season's worth of play where you're not good worth the upgrade from a 3rd round pick potentially to a 1st round pick, moving in the 4th/5th round picks across 2 years, and Chase Edmonds? I would say absolutely hell yes. So from Denver's point of view, I think this is a no-brainer. From Miami's point of view, it's more complex because you've given up the only 1st round pick you're going to have. But is Bradley Chubb in a vacuum worth a 1st round pick? Maybe. If you're going to get this guy going forward, sure. But you're about to have to pick up, a big contract and he's not, he isn't great. He's good. So it's not the equivalent of the A.J. Brown deal, where you're paying a 1st round pick for a guy that's immediately about to step in and be a top 5 player at his position, completely transform what you have at that spot, and it's worth the contract and the 1st round pick. That's not what we're talking about here. It's like, is it worth the 1st round pick to get a guy that's good? We'll upgrade your position, but you have to come with that giant contract, and it probably hurts you long term given the resources you already have located in various areas in that roster. That, I think, is more debatable. So I think it's not like they've completely mortgaged the future for this year, but it's definitely a this year focused move of, we'll take a percentage on this year and we'll lose a percentage the next sort of 4.
I think comparing anything to A.J. Brown is going to be unfair. And what makes the Eagles look really good in this whole
But my
equation.
point being, it's one thing to trade a first-round pick for a guy for the proven commodity of somebody that is not just good, but really good. And the difference on Denver's perspective, like the other moves you're talking about of trade away Buckner, replace him with Javon Kinlaw. Trade away Stephon Diggs, replace him with Justin Jefferson. Like the difference there is Denver doesn't need to spend the first-round pick on his replacement. In theory, the replacement's already there. They've got Baron Browning. They've got Nick Bonito. They've got edge rushers sitting there. And by the way, they already traded for somebody, Jacob Martin. So they don't need to spend that first round. That's the thing I don't like about that strategy is if you trade away a guy for a first-round pick and then have to use that first-round pick on the guy's replacement.
Yeah, I don't want to have to do that. Right.
So Denver aren't. So this move from their perspective, I think, is basically flawless. From Miami's perspective, I think it gets a lot more debatable because Chubb is good, not great.
Picture it, Sam. Your kicker's lining up for an onside kick. The chances of regaining possession are slim. The stakes are high. Tension's higher. Your pulse, it's racing. He kicks it, bounces up, pops up in the air. I don't know what's going to happen, but you can make every play feel this exciting with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, and their unbeatable offers right now. New customers can make any $5 NFL bet and get $200 in free bets if your team wins. Check it out. In addition to the usual bets, everyone can boost their winnings with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. And to make things even sweeter, you could throw down on those stepped-up same-game parlays once per game day all season long. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF to get $200 in free bets if your team wins. Just place a $5 bet on any football game only at DraftKings Sportsbook using the code PFF. All right, let's talk about the Bears a little bit and what they've done.
Well, hang on. So what we're going to do about these. First of all, I want to hear your take on whether or not the Miami thing is what it looks like from a Miami's perspective and whether they have incorrectly or ill-advised mortgaged the future for this year. Number two, we have to give a winner for each trade.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
So this is like, I'm over here pushing back. I got Dan Orlovsky, who wakes up on a Monday morning and just feels the need to throw declarations out into the air.
Okay.
Jalen Hurts is the best decision maker in football.
It's not just Dano. This is sports media these days.
It's sports media. It's everybody. But
Chris Sims.
Oh, Sims.
Your Sims.
Kenneth Walker's the best running back in the NFL. You saw it yesterday.
You
saw it yesterday. How could you argue it happened yesterday?
Kenneth Walker is the best running back in the NFL.
I don't want to play that game, Sam. I don't. If we have to sit here with merely millions and millions of listeners and we don't grow, I'm willing to make that sacrifice in order to not become that. Let's make this declaration. Whatever I saw yesterday, whatever I saw 10 minutes ago is the thing.
I mean, just like...
Oh, just pick a winner?
No. But the Kenneth Walker thing, right? I'm sorry. I'm there. It's worked. I've been suckered in by the idiotic statement, and I'm there.
Let's get
right?
We like Chris. We got a great relationship with NBC. Let's get him on the show.
Kenneth Walker is averaging 5.4 yards per attempt. He has 5 touchdowns. He's averaging 3.6 yards after contact. He's broken.
He's really good.
27 tackles. These are all really good numbers. They're also all paling in comparison to Nick Chubb's numbers.
Right.
Like, just that one guy. There's no conceivable argument you can make that says Kenneth Walker is better than Nick Chubb right now. To one guy.
Maybe you misinterpreted Chris Sims' premise.
I didn't. He literally, now, to be fair to him, somebody else articulated the argument that he had made off camera. And he was like, yeah. So he didn't come out and be like, hey, tell you what, this guy's the best running back in the NFL right this second. Like somebody else basically said, hey, you were saying you think he's the best. And they was like, yeah, okay. So he might not have volunteered the information himself, but he still has the thought, which is bad enough. You know?
Yeah.
It's wrong. Look, there's a lot of room for debate in these things, but he isn't.
Oh, Dano had the
what was Dano?
Kellen Moore. So it was Jalen Hurts is the best decision maker in football.
Okay.
Kellen Moore was the best play caller in the NFL yesterday or something like that.
Yesterday.
On Sunday, right?
Well, that's an easier one to argue.
Which means Dan, on his flight back from England, somehow watched literally every single play in the NFL and in his brain sorted this whole thing out and said, Kellen Moore number 1, everyone else behind him.
Which feels a little unlikely given he couldn't figure out how to watch the game in London when he was there. Couldn't find Thursday Night Football in London.
Just saying.
To the point where Twitch ripped him a new one.
Yeah.
You know?
So
hang on. That we've taken down Chris Sims. We've taken down Dano.
Who's next?
Emmanuel Acho was talking about how the Miami Dolphins, they're just hitting home run after home run. Every move they made, it's perfect. Everything.
I don't even want to acknowledge any take from Emmanuel Acho because he has gotten to a level of extreme. When I'm joking with Dan O because I think he brings.
Dano believes what he says.
He does. Dan believes what he says.
I have respect for that.
I think he watches the film.
Yeah.
He grinds it and all that stuff. And and he knows to go like a little over the top. That's part of the game, right? So like the Jalen Hurts thing. His premise is right. Like Jalen Hurts has been fantastic. Yeah. His premise is correct.
And if you're working,
and he presents it as like a little over the top.
And if you're working on a TV broadcast like that, you are being encouraged.
Emmanuel Acho would roll in here and be like, Sam Monson has the best hair in sports media. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the type of take he would bring to the table here. Mm-hmm. He would see you, like say you hit 60 miles an hour in the video later. He would see you hit 60 and be like, I think he's got 90 in him. I think Sam's got 90 in him.
Maybe.
I believe it. You know?
Well, look,
I mean, I'm just saying, like, nothing. They don't. So I'm not even going to acknowledge
enough steroid cycles. You know, who knows?
It's true. Maybe you've got the potential.
Also,
maybe he sees the potential in you.
Learning how to pitch. Who knows what extras in there?
You're a moldable clay.
Yeah,
is what you are here. So,
that's all.
I'm saying.
What I was going to say.
What did he say?
I disagree a lot with Dano and with Chris Sims, but both guys, I believe what they say, and I have an immediate higher level of respect for anybody that believes what they say, even if what they say is crazy, than people that are out there deliberately faking it and making bullshit up and don't believe it. I hate that. Yes. I hate Skip Bayless and everything he stands for. Yeah. I hate it with a fiery passion of 1,000 supernovas. I hate that it exists, and I hate that it works. And I hate anybody that goes down that approach of just spouting something that they know will be provocative, even if they know it's bullshit. And I suspect Emmanuel Acho falls into that category.
Yeah, he's got that playbook.
A lot of his takes.
He's got that playbook. Yeah.
So anyway, those are three people that had takes. What the hell were we talking about before that?
I was going to
Who won the trade?
This was me pushing back on grading and who won the trade. I would say, winners and losers. What are they really? But I like the Broncos. Look, the millennials don't believe in winners and losers.
Webster's dictionary defines winners.
I like the Broncos' end of this deal.
Yes.
Right. For me, it's easier. It's easier to believe in the future and the idea that I'm probably not going to pay this guy $20 million a year, so we're going to get a first-round pick for a guy that we're not going to sign.
Yeah. Denver won the trade, but to Miami's
But I get it. I understand it from both sides.
Yeah. To Miami's credit, they are better this year, and they obviously think they can win this year.
Yeah. But there's risk, a lot of risk attached to it, because you're probably going to sign him for a lot of money. It's going to make that Emmanuel Ogbah $16 million APY look really bad.
Right.
And at some point, Tua is playing well enough. At some point, you're going to pay Tua, right? And you're not going to want to have, when you start to get guys above $10 million, how many guys do you have above $10 million on your roster? You have Jerome Baker making over 12. You have Ogbah. It's going to be tough.
Yep.
From a money standpoint. I want to discuss the Bears, though.
Okay.
Can I discuss the Bears?
Sure.
And what they've done? We already did a PFF NFL Daily on their two other trades. Robert Quinn to the Philadelphia Eagles, Roquan Smith going to the Baltimore Ravens. It looked like a fire sale in Chicago.
This is the first time they're buying.
And now they're buying. They get Chase Claypool from the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 2023 second-round pick. Did we ever get the actual report if it's the Ravens or if it's the Bears? It's there. So it's a high second-rounder. Well, higher than the Ravens' second-rounder.
Probably.
From a Steelers perspective, I'll use the same analysis. I think this is great, right? You spent a 2 on Claypool. You got a 2 a few years later to get a shot at a player. I think over time that stuff works.
Yeah.
For the Bears, why did they become buyers for Chase Claypool is the thing we're asking right now. I'm not saying negatively. I'm just saying, like, what is their reasoning here if you're the Bears?
John Helmkamp on Twitter had a tweet that I just liked as a summation of this. Ryan Poles literally passed on George Pickens with both of his 2022 second-round picks to then trade a 2023 second-round pick for the guy that Pickens made irrelevant in Pittsburgh. When you look at it like that,
there's some perspective there. There is some perspective there.
When you lay it out like that, it doesn't sound great, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't. Other than the fact that they did have the 2 second-rounders that they got. One is the great Jaquan Brisker.
The great.
Right? Oh, yeah, he's in the great category.
He's in the Villanueva territory.
Yeah. Did you see that interception he had Monday Night Football?
I did, after getting kicked in the dick.
Yes. Right? He bounces back. Right?
Takes some bouncing.
Yeah. Balls goes I have no pun here. I'm not going to try.
Okay.
But he made a great catch.
Yeah.
On the pass that allegedly hit the wire that was 15 feet above where the ball was. But
Correct.
anyway, Brisker and Kyler Gordon. So the other perspective is you have Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, and Chase Claypool with three second-round picks.
Yeah.
Although the Pickens-Claypool comparison is an interesting one.
It's another one where I think the selling team, it clearly makes sense. Like for Pittsburgh to cash in on a guy that had fallen down the depth chart, that wasn't as big of a factor in the offense that he used to be, and probably wasn't ever going to work out into being something more than he is right now. Getting the second-round pick back, essentially, that you spent on him, perfect. Brilliant deal. Then you go, okay, what are the Bears doing? So why would they make a move like this, particularly when they're a team that has been selling throughout the entirety of this? And, you know, it doesn't make a ton of sense, except Chase Claypool, we saw what he did as a rookie. He is huge. He's got speed. He's got physicality. He's got incredible ability at the catch point, even if it's inconsistent. He's the definition of a can-do player, you know, and there's a lot of people in the NFL that love guys like that. But also what I think is intriguing is Chicago can offer him the kind of showcase that nobody else can. Well, the Packers, I suppose. But, like, Chicago can go out here and say, you might be the number one option in this offense.
Yeah.
Like, go out there and show what you can do if you're the alpha. You know, you're not behind Deontay Johnson and George Pickens and anybody else in that roster. Like, you're our number one guy. Go out there and show us that you can be a legit star for this offense and for Justin Fields. Nobody else can give him that kind of showcase. And maybe it looks exactly the same, just scaled up for volume. But maybe given a better opportunity and a better, volume role, all of a sudden the occasional bad play doesn't matter as much because he's catching 6 instead of, 1 or 2.
I mean, you describe mostly negatively the NFL looking at can-do players and maybe getting blinded by them. But of all the positions where you would buy into, this guy can do A, B, and C. He's not as good at X, Y, and Z, but he can do A, B, and C. Receiver's one of those positions where you can at least say, this guy's big and fast and he can win at the catch point sometimes. I'm going to tap into that part of his skill set. If you're a highlight reel player, that's what you're describing with can do. If you're a highlight reel player, that doesn't work on the offensive line, right? Because you're stuck. Like, you're there every single play. And if you're just good at, like, screen blocks, you're going to get exposed in, every other part of the game. But as a receiver, if you're just a part of the entire passing attack, it is easier to say, here's this guy who's 6'4", 238, runs fast. Like, we have a spot for that, right? And I do think he'll have an opportunity to be featured here as the true 2 to Darnell Mooney, or 1 and 1A, and maybe we'll see if he can expand that role. But if Claypool just becomes a downfield threat, which is what he looked like he was going to be after year 1, then that's worth the shot there, right? He is, for a guy that has that size, he's caught 41% of his contested targets in his career. I think you remember week 1 of his rookie season, he's balling out at the catch point and all that stuff. He's inconsistent there, but he does have big playability. And I think the Bears can tap into that, and it makes it intriguing as they run the ball as often as they are. The play-action game with Claypool and with Mooney, it might have something there. So that's worth a shot. So I think they're looking – they said it's worth a second-round pick in the future in our rebuilding effort to get a receiver in now so that we could see how he meshes with Justin Fields. We could do well by Justin Fields here. And also, this is a shot at a receiver that we're going to take. But we're just going to do it a year early instead of wait until next year.
Yeah, and I think the inconsistency or the bad plays become a smaller problem if all of a sudden you're catching an awful lot more. Like, if you get 2 targets a game and you make a mess of one of them, that's a problem, right? Because 50% of everything that goes your way is a waste of time.
Yeah.
If you're getting 10 targets and you make a mess of one of them, that's a much smaller problem. Even if you make a mess of 2 of them, it's a smaller problem. Like, you know what I mean? So I think there's a chance that he ends up being a better player in a higher volume role than he is in Pittsburgh. The other thing is, I don't generally like the idea of playing with house money, or the attitude of playing with house money if you have extra draft picks. But even after making this move, Chicago's going to have a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 2 4ths, 2 5ths, and a 7th round pick in the draft. They're still well stocked with draft picks to make all these moves. So I think in that context, a 2nd round pick for Chase Claypool it's a reasonable roll of the dice. I would have liked it more if it was a lower, a pick around lower, but they don't have. Right,
True. And I'll just say too, you accumulate these draft picks, even Miami too. They've accumulated a ton of draft capital the last few years. And Miami's actually hitting a point where a lot of those first rounders are going to start to get paid, but they're probably, well, they would be getting paid. They're just not getting second contracts, a bunch of them. But when you accumulate draft capital, not just so you can make picks, but so you have versatility to trade them, to make the picks, to trade down, whatever it is. The Bears have been stockpiling picks, as you said, so you can spend a little bit to trade, right? To trade for players. Mm-hmm. I want to get into the Lions and the Vikings making another trade together. But first, if I can find my read here. Even though Best Ball Mania has ended, Underdog Fantasy is still the easiest and most fun way to spice up your football season with their pick'em game. Just look at your favorite or least favorite player stats. Pick whether you think they'll end up with a higher or lower total than the number in this week's game. And you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it so simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. You pick between 2 and 5 players for your pick'em entry, get all your picks right, and you'll take home some cold, hard cash. It's that simple to get started. Just head to underdogfantasy.com or download the app, sign up with promo code PFF, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code PFF. Get in on the action today. Sam, one of the most intriguing trades of yesterday, Calvin Ridley going from the Atlanta Falcons to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Did I paste the terms, right? We need some time here. We need some times for the terms of the Calvin Ridley trade. As a reminder, Calvin Ridley suspended for the year for betting on the Falcons, in part to beat the Jaguars as part of a parlay.
Ironically.
Yes. If you can't beat them, join them, as they say. In exchange for Calvin Ridley, the Falcons would receive a 2023 fifth-round pick and a 2024 conditional fourth-round selection, sources told ESPN's Adam Schefter. The conditional pick would become a third-rounder if Ridley reaches certain incentives in 2023, or it could become a second-rounder if he's signed to an extension. So there's a lot of conditions here, including if the Jaguars feel good enough about Calvin Ridley to sign him as an extension, it becomes a second-round pick, which I think from the Falcons' perspective, it's great. You know, you're going to move on from him anyway, and, you know, the better he does, the better you do. And if you're the Jaguars, the better he does, the better you do, right? I mean, if you like Calvin Ridley enough to extend him, that seems to be worth the second-round pick for a wide receiver one.
Isn't there also a condition based off when they reinstate him?
Yeah, I might have.
I
read whatever's limited here, whatever's on ESPN.com. I didn't have time. We don't have time to go through all of the conditions, though.
No,
you know?
But there's a lot of conditions attached to this one for both picks that they've given up. Yeah. But I don't think it really changes the bottom line because I think the conditions are fair. You know, they scale proportionately relative to how good it is for Jacksonville. So the better it is for them, the more they're giving up, which I think is ultimately the right idea. Like that's the purpose of those things. But I think it's great for Jacksonville. Like they're effectively buying low on a guy that's proven he can be a really good starting caliber wide receiver that can win at all levels of the field, and finally give them some legitimate weapons on the outside in addition to Christian Kirk, who primarily works, you know, best from the slot. All of a sudden, you've got a receiving core that's starting to come together.
Yeah, I think for the Jaguars, the one next piece there, because for the last 6 shows, I'm like, get Trevor Lawrence, an X receiver. I don't think Calvin Ridley's necessarily that guy. And when I say X, I mean like the number one receiver that you're going to rely upon. So this is where it gets interesting as you're building this receiving core in Jacksonville. Ridley had 3 really, really good seasons. Peaked in 2020, averaged over 15 yards per catch, had over 1,300 yards, 85 receiving grade. Julio Jones was, in and out of the lineup that year, I believe. So they relied on him more. But when they really put more on his plate last year, it wasn't all that productive. It was average 9 yards per catch, and it was in the middle of his worst season last year. But as a complementary piece, you have a Christian Kirk, you have a Calvin Ridley, and Ridley's a very good route runner. You mentioned all levels of the field. He can win down the field, right? Is there one more receiver now that they can draft, get into the building there? You got to load up on playmakers there to get the most out of Trevor Lawrence, because Lawrence is starting to run out of time before we see Geno Smith come good like 10 years later. But if you're gonna make the most of Trevor Lawrence's rookie contract, you better add more pieces. And this is a great move to add a huge complementary piece for next year for the Jaguars.
Yep. Hang on, we didn't do who won the last trade.
What was it?
What was the last trade?
What did we just talk about?
We just talked about Claypool.
Steelers.
Correct.
Steelers absolutely won. I mean, the Steelers gave up their 3rd wide receiver for a second round pick. That's a huge win for Pittsburgh. Absolutely.
Yep. Absolutely.
So Good job by the Steelers. We don't say enough nice things about the Steelers on the show here.
I think they also did a good job with the William Jackson deal.
They did.
They picked up it's a pretty big contract they're picking up, so that's not great. But
a lot of it's paid.
Yeah,
I think it's a pretty cheap
and it's not
flyer.
It's basically costing them, effectively nothing, right? They're swapping conditional 6/7th round picks. Like you're moving up, or Washington is moving up in a low round in 2025 to get this contract off their books. Effectively, is what we're talking about there. So from Pittsburgh's point of view, who has a need in the secondary, that's a good roll of the dice.
So I just want to – so the William Jackson thing, if you remember historically, first round when Jackson came out, 2017 was it? The Bengals pick William Jackson, a pick in front of the Steelers. And all the reports were the Steelers wanted William Jackson. And then they decided to go with the next corner, which was Artie Burns out of Miami, which felt like a bit of a stretch at the time to get Artie Burns. We loved William Jackson. It was great. And then they get Artie Burns instead. So, 6 years later.
And
they get their guy.
The best plays that William Jackson has ever had were against Pittsburgh when he was covering Antonio Brown for a couple of games in his second season.
I think the Steelers are big winners trade deadline. Write that down. Remember that day.
I already tweeted it yesterday.
Steelers win.
Yeah, they won trade deadline
The unfortunate part is no Steelers actually, they can see you if you muted them.
Yeah.
All the people that you muted will still see them.
I just don't see them whinging about it.
Gotcha.
So the Ridley thing. Atlanta, obviously, it makes sense. Like, you're probably not bringing him back at this point. You've already upgraded. You've changed. You've gone a different direction. Kyle Pitts, Drake London. You have your receivers going forward. So they're getting something for nothing, I guess, in their eyes. For Jacksonville, you're buying low because the dude's suspended and can't play. His value is cratered. You're buying low on a guy that could come in next year and be your best wide receiver, or very minimum be, your Devontae Smith if you go and draft an elite wide receiver, or if you find another guy. Like, that's, I think, a great move for them as well. This is one where I think it's win-win.
Now it's win-win.
Yeah.
You're over here Drew from the chat is right. Like, why do we have to frame this in terms of winning and losing? Because you said to.
Because everybody has to win and lose. Everybody, always has to happen.
Why can't everybody just win?
Can't happen.
Everybody's in different.
It's not how life works, Steve.
Different
there's
life
winners
cycles.
And there's losers. And if you're not a winner,
this is kind of win-win.
You're a loser.
All right, we got to do T.J. Hawkinson to the Vikings for a second-round pick and a 2024 third-round pick. I think something went back in exchange, but Lions giving up on former first-round pick T.J. Hawkinson. They get a second and a third in return. The Vikings get some insurance for Irv Smith, who's now banged up and hurt. And man, it's a nice little weapon to add to Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen.
They give up a 2023 fourth, and they get a 2023 second. So they've moved down. The Lions move up 2 rounds in the 2023 draft, and then they also give up a 2024 third and get back a 2024 fourth. So they move down a round in the 2024 draft, but up 2 rounds in the 2023 draft and get rid of Hawkinson.
That feels pretty good from the Vikings' perspective.
Yeah. I mean, they bring in, yes.
Because the Vikings they're not losing draft picks. They're losing rounds, right?
They only really
at a point in the draft, the second round's valuable, but once you get into third and fourth, you're talking about not a huge drop off.
You're moving down 2 rounds next year, and you're moving up 1 round the year after that, but in a lower capacity to get TJ Hawkinson.
I mean, in the right to pay Hawkinson.
Yes, and the contract. Obviously.
That's the other perspective.
Which is so the difference between this one, like Minnesota is getting a player that should probably feature pretty heavily because Irv Smith is injured again, and maybe Hawkinson becomes their tight end of the future going forward. But you're about to have to pay him a big contract. From Detroit's point of view, where this differs from the Bradley Chubb deal of getting rid of a guy that you probably weren't going to be paying anyway, is you're not getting a first-round draft pick back. You're getting like a juggling of position in the next couple of drafts over rounds that happen on day 2 onwards. This is very different in compensation terms versus the Bradley Chubb deal.
Hawkinson went number 8 overall, and our draft guy, Mike Renner, is like anti-first-round tight end. The one guy he wanted to break that rule for was Kyle Pitts. And even that, if you're like, hey, is Kyle Pitts really bringing back the value of a quote-unquote tight end? Maybe not yet. But either way, Hawkinson went 8 overall. The history of tight ends is that they do take time to get going, right? The Vikings, I think, are just shrewd in this sense of get your tight ends once they're into the league 4 or 5 years if you can. And for not a huge price tag as far as draft picks go, yeah, you're probably going to have to pay them as we talked about. But at this point, the tight ends around the NFL, it's about haves and have-nots. There's not a lot of haves around. Hawkinson is breaking out maybe into one of the guys, right? Like into that top 10 where the rest of the league is like really iffy at that position. Thing is,
contracts for tight ends aren't that expensive.
They're not crazy,
still.
Right?
Like, okay, let's assume he's not going to be in the Darren Waller, George Kittle, Travis Kelce kind of range because he's just not that good a player. Let's put him more in the David Njoku, Dawson Knox kind of ballpark, optimistically. I mean, those guys are on $13 million a year, which is, I mean, it's not insignificant, but it's not, Tyreek Hill's on like $30 million a year, right? That's an outlay you have to think about. $13 million a year for a guy that is 25, and if you're going to lock him up long term, if you think he can be like a pretty valuable part of your offense, all right, it's not cheap, but it's not crippling either.
Who wins this? I like it for the Vikings.
Yeah, it has to be a Vikings win, I think.
I think so, because the draft capital they're giving up is not crazy.
It's just not enough coming back from Detroit's point of view for them to be real winners.
And I'm not saying the Lions had to get like a first-round pick for their former first-round pick, but it feels much better for like a –
But if they just got a second.
Bradley Chubb was a first, and you got a first back.
Yeah. Or even a second. Yeah. Like if they just got a second-round pick.
Just a pure second.
The end.
Yeah.
Like if it was T.J. Hawkinson for a second-round draft pick, end of story, I think they work out better.
And it also just feels like one where the Vikings are putting it through their trade calculators and making sure that they're getting just enough back and everything.
Kwesi,
it just feels like Kwesi's got like 6 computers going through running.
Big take on the model.
Yeah. Why don't you just throw in a little?
Have you hit up Kwesi about the model?
I haven't yet.
Feels like a man that would entertain the conversation.
Yeah, I'll talk to Kwesi about it.
He might ask you some questions that I don't know if you're prepared to answer, though, which,
I mean, other than saying linear, I don't have much of an answer on the how.
Flatten it?
Yeah. I flattened it, ran it linearly, and the results are good.
Perfect.
All right, Seth Payne is probably coming in soon. If he's on time, we got him in 3 minutes here. So we have to get to
explain the grade.
How many trades did we just ignore here?
A few.
All right, we'll talk about them.
But they were the less cool ones.
Yeah, we'll talk about them more as we go here.
We need the explain the grade segment. Which
all right, let's get to explain the grade.
I'm sure PFF will have me with a low grade for that, but I'll keep it rolling.
I do hope there's sound attached to that. I think there's supposed to be, and I would have thought we'd hear it through the earpiece today. But
yeah, I didn't hear any sound.
Anyway, the two explain the grade things for today. Number one, Jaire Alexander, Green Bay Packers cornerback. Sunday Night Football, there's a big thing being made of Jaire and Stephon Diggs jawing at each other down the tunnel as they're entering the game. Of course, Stephon Diggs goes off for 108 yards and a touchdown, but Jaire Alexander ends up with a 90.8 PFF grade. How did that happen, Steve?
There's none of Diggs' production really happened against Jaire Alexander. That's the first answer. And then, oh, by the way, he breaks up 3 passes as well.
Yeah,
Jaire himself played well.
Read his coverage numbers. 5 targets into Jaire's coverage. 0 catches. 1 interception. Okay, that was when Josh Allen randomly decided to just go nuts and start heaving the ball to Packers defenders. And 3 pass breakups. Jaire Alexander was locked down in that game. Stephon Diggs absolutely made his point with emphasis, but it didn't happen against Jaire Alexander. Primarily, it happened against Rasul Douglas.
Yeah, the one time Diggs was open against Alexander, there was an overthrow in there, so that doesn't show up in the stats necessarily, but you still get a negative for Jaire. But that shows just how well he played otherwise, right? It wasn't a perfect game across the board. He did give it up. He gave up a little bit, but made big plays on the ball.
So when we all love to think about wide receiver versus corner matchups as these one-on-one battles that happen every single snap, time after time after time, but it rarely goes down that way. And in this game, like Jaire versus Stephon Diggs was the story, but when Jaire was covering Stephon Diggs, generally speaking, he shut him down, and Diggs had to go somewhere else to get his production.
And you'll see stuff like this. You mentioned like Jaire's interception. It was a poor decision by Allen. Great job by him going and making the play. Maybe the Packers should be playing more man coverage and taking advantage of having Jaire Alexander. They don't play. Yeah, they don't play that as much though.
Well, they have in the last few weeks though. They have kind of dedicated Jaire to that guy. I wonder if because Buffalo has Gabriel Davis, you know, they're like, I don't know if we want to dedicate just this one guy to Diggs and leave Gabriel Davis against whoever happens to be there. I don't know. I think versus certain teams, Green Bay looks at it and says, maybe we just leave Jair where he is. And versus certain teams, it's like they have one threat. Let's take him away.
All right, so the other player that you wanted to explain was Bradley Bozeman of the Ravens.
Bradley Bozeman, because he's a great example of how sometimes the stats lie. So the last one, the stats did a pretty good job of explaining how Jair Alexander played relative to the kind of narrative of the game. But in this one, Bradley Bozeman comes out of the game with 0 pressures allowed, but he had a pass blocking grade of 29.8. Well, that doesn't make any sense. If your pass blocking grade is terrible, you should be giving up pressures. You had a 46.7 grade overall. So when you look at the plays, he had 3 of those, what we call BDs in our system, that are losing blocks from a pass blocking standpoint, but the ball is gone before they get a chance to become pressure. One of which, by the way, he is literally face first in the ground after a second. He is whooped.
Did I say Bozeman of the Ravens, by the way?
You might have done.
My bad.
Panthers.
Of the Panthers.
But he is annihilated on this one play, like face first in the turf, and his guy is bearing down on the quarterback, but it's a quick pass and the ball's gone. He has several assignment screw-ups, one of which, one, he makes a complete mess of a stunt. There's another on a run play where he straight ignores the linebacker at the second level on a combo block, just stays on the defensive tackle, not because he's being held, not because there's any great need to do it. He just stays on him, and there's no one else to pick up the linebacker, nor is there ever anybody available to pick up. Like, it's his man, and he just never goes to it. So he makes several mental mistakes in the course of the game. He also had one pressure that he gave up that was negated by a penalty. So these are things that we count in the grading, only when the penalty has nothing to do with the pressure.
Right.
So the penalty was like in the secondary somewhere, defensive holding or pass interference or whatever. Nothing to do with the play on Bozeman, but it takes a pressure away from his stats. Doesn't show up in the stats, but it happened.
Well explained.
Thank you.
There we go. Bradley Bozeman, explain the grade. Always hit us up, unless we're wrong. Hit us up with more explain the grade suggestions for next week. All right, it's time. We've got Seth Payne on the line. We're going to preview a little Houston Texans and Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to talk a little World Series, and we'll get Seth in here whenever. Now this is where we're very professional. We get to look at this. There he is.
It was smooth.
Ah,
We locked up. Look at that transition we had here.
What's up,
Welcome, Seth.
hello, you guys. I appreciate you having me on, and your producer was sweating it out because there's a huge shortage of USB to C adapters in my household right now. So the ghost of Steve Jobs is laughing at me as I struggle to join you guys.
I think there's a shortage of those everywhere. My wife was looking for one yesterday, and we didn't have one either. So I think those just don't really exist.
Well, I'm glad we made it happen here, and I just want to start by saying I'm honored to have a late '90s Jaguars legend on the show with us. It's my favorite team of all time, and it's the first time we've had anyone from the late '90s Jaguars here on the show. So welcome.
Is it really?
Yeah. Mark Brunell turned us down. We got to get Jimmy or Keenan.
Brunell, it seems like between Brunell and Baselli, especially because Brunell's been in the media a little bit, and Brunell and Baselli, obviously. I'll send both of them an angry text.
Yes, please do. Send them to our show, and Tony especially, because he gets pretty angry about PFF and offensive line grades generally.
Wait, is there?
That's right.
is there like a late '90s group text? Could you get in on that?
Oh, yeah.
Not as much. It's hard because I don't get to go back to many of the Jaguars reunions or events that they have because I'm working on Sundays. So I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's a few of the group texts, but not one that I'm involved in.
Tony Brackens and the other guys definitely have that.
I mean, if Seth's getting ostracized from the group text, you've got no shot.
They'll let me in. They'll let me in.
I don't think it's like a conscious ostracizing. It's just one of convenience. Yeah.
Well, Seth, I don't know how much we want to preview the actual Eagles and Texans game. It's going to be a beatdown, right? But we want to get your take on the Texans. But real quick, where do you stand on the World Series right now? Down 2-1 now. Phillies are up 2-1, but your Astros here down 2-1.
Look, I've seen the Astros down before. They've been in this position, and you watch baseball long enough, that 2-1 can feel like an insurmountable deficit, but obviously it's not that much. The biggest sweat that we have going right now in Houston is that 2 of your 3 best pitchers in Justin Verlander and Lance McCullers just don't seem to have it in the World Series, which is kind of an issue.
Yeah. Phillies dropping bombs last night. So anyway, find some spider tack, get those pitchers back on track, and
hey.
Not you guys. It's not a Houston dig. It's just pitchers,
baseball,
pitchers in general. That's what we do.
There is something that's kind of related to football, like a little nugget that I think is relative to, or that's relatable to football. Is Lance McCullers last night, aside from having control issues, was probably tipping his pitches to the Phillies, and that's a much bigger part of the game than I think you ever really know in football, because nobody, like the smart guys that do it a lot, don't really divulge their secrets. So trying to figure out if you're tipping is just it is a constant battle. And then also when you're trying to figure out if you've got a tip on somebody else, you play that game, and Baselli was really good at this. You might think you have some tendency on Baselli from his stance, but Baselli is also quite possibly kind of baiting you with something and putting it on film for a little bit, and then switching it up on you if he knows he's coming up on a smart guy. So that cat and mouse game in pitching in football is more similar than a lot of baseball people probably realize.
Yeah, I mean, Sam, you're a pitcher now too. I mean, you realize the stress. Like, you've got there's one hitter, and then there's 8 other guys staring at you every pitch to see if you're giving anything away, to see if you're tipping, right? That's what they're doing. And so I was, looking back at my career, I had to be tipping based off my stats. I was definitely tipping pitches.
As a taller guy, Steve, I would imagine, just like it is with quarterbacks, so there's so few really tall quarterbacks, there are a lot more really tall pitchers, but all of those things, like a tell, like you've got bigger angles. Like it's easier to pick up a long limb that's at a little bit of a different angle than some compact guy, wouldn't it be?
It was my advantage is what kept me around. It's like people think, well, you could change arm angles, you could do all this different stuff, and there's upside to your size, right? You get the ball on the hitter quicker. At the same time, it's tough to get all these moving parts going in the same. It's such a precise motion to create power and to create accuracy, right? To create that control. It's tough to get all those. That's why Randy Johnson took forever, and then once he got it, he was incredible, right? So we're just kind of like late bloomers, the really tall guys. That's what I would say.
I see.
Yeah. Do you have any Texans questions now, Sam? Anything about the Texans, or do you want to follow up on baseball?
You guys are avoiding like hell talking about the Texans, who are, look, it's an interesting bunch, guys. Yeah. You've got Lovie Smith trying to do the best he can with some promising young guys in the secondary. I think, Derek Stingley is progressing along nicely in that system where, as you guys know, it's not like Tampa 2 of the 90s or early 2000s or anything like that, but it is still a penetrating front 7. And I think more importantly, it's a penetrating front 4. So if you look at, let's talk about a defense that people actually like talking about, the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills have a hell of a defense, but they still have a hard time stopping the run because they're playing the run on their way to the quarterback. They're penetrating. If, they're disrupting, they're not necessarily always really gap sound. It works really well, though, when you have really good players. The Texans don't have anything remotely resembling a Warren Sapp or a Simeon Rice. They certainly don't have a Brian Urlacher. Any of those guys from those hallmark defenses, the Texans just don't have. So when they're trying to stop the run, there's no, a lesser athlete can at least sit down and anchor and play technique. The Texans have these guys that are trying to shoot gaps. They don't get across the line of scrimmage. They get washed. And then all of a sudden, Derrick Henry has time to build up speed before he faces the single high safety who kind of throws himself at Derrick Henry's mercy at his ankles and gets washed aside. That's what watching the Texans defense is right now.
Well described.
Yeah. Do you have a sense for what the Texans are going to do once? Because it feels like they haven't really started this whole rebuild yet. The whole thing was kind of on pause while they got rid of Deshaun Watson, got the haul for the trade haul for him and, the contract off their books. But that was kind of too late in the day to actually do anything with it. Like the first real move we saw them make was with the Derek Stingley draft pick. Next year is when they're actually going to start this whole project, right? What is this going to look like?
That's the $1 million question, because for one, they had to clear a lot of cap space. They've got a whole bunch of dead money, like way more dead money than anybody else this year. But some of that is Nick Caserio dead money. Some of that is signings or extensions or reworked contracts that Nick Caserio gave out. But a large part of it was just strategies. You had to clear the deck last year. You didn't have a first-round pick in 3 out of 4 years. So this year, I don't know. I don't think they specifically targeted, hey, we're going to go after defensive backs, and then next year we're going to go after these guys. I was surprised that they drafted a couple of defensive backs as high as they did, just because Lovie Smith's always been obsessed with the defensive linemen, getting that 3 technique, getting in the pass rush. He does realize now that, okay, this is you got to be able to play man coverage in this league. So they took care of some of that. The nice thing about that is that Nick Caserio is a guy that's been in a system that really respects coverage. And I think that if they decide to move on from Lovie Smith at some point, they can hopefully have Derek Stingley and somebody to add alongside Steven Nelson, who's doing just fine for what they need right now. But ultimately in the draft, they've got to take defensive linemen. Or in free agency, via trade, whatever it is, they've got to get guys and get genuine heat on the passer. Because you guys talked up Jerry Hughes, and appropriately so, in the offseason. I think that was a really nice signing for the Texans. But you can't have a 34-year-old guy that's he's doing a lot of the same things he's always done, but he's not going to give you 15 sacks a year. So they need more actually high impact guys.
Are you surprised that group, the pass rushers, the edge rushers in particular, aren't as productive this year as we thought they might be? Like Jerry Hughes, yeah, but he's 34, right? Like he's reaching the point where he should be declining. But Okoronkwo we really liked as a sort of situational guy that could maybe step into a bigger role and do better. Jonathan Grenard last season had a really good grade, looked really efficient in his snaps, felt like he'd be a better player given a bigger opportunity. None of those guys are really bringing that much.
Yeah, I think one of the huge issues right now, and it's become increasingly an issue as the season has gone along, is just how bad they are at stopping the run. So if you look at what the Titans did last week, they passed one time in the second half. There's hard to generate a pass rush when that's happening. But beyond that, I do think that, I guess, maybe Robert Quinn would be a good example if we look at like Jerry Hughes and Robert Quinn. So Robert Quinn went against the Texans and didn't have a great game. I thought that Laramie Tunsil did a good job against Robert Quinn. And I know Robert Quinn hasn't had a great season, but they'll see Robert Quinn again against the Eagles. I think Quinn in that defense all of a sudden might have a lot more opportunities because the one-on-ones become more pure one-on-ones. The stat that you guys had on Grenard last year was actually a really good one, which was it's a true pass rush when a guy's just isolated and it's a genuine one-on-one pass rush. There's no screens. There's no scrambles.
Yeah, it takes out screens and play action and stuff. Yep.
Yeah, Grenard in those situations did really well. I don't know how many of those he's had this year because teams can just simply, they can max protect. They can do play action. The linebackers just get duped like hell. These linebackers look like little kittens watching a ping pong match on the television. When play action comes, they just fall for it every time, and then they sprint like hell to get back to their spots. So there's a lot of things working against the guys that are there, and the guys that are there still weren't going to be your premier all-pro types.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Eagles-Texans here, and it is fascinating. We do get the two cities, Houston and Philly, going up against each other in football and in baseball. What should fans be looking for from the Texans? What are Texans fans looking for as far as development with the team? And is there anything they can do to take on look, it's one of the best teams in the NFL, and the Eagles. How can the Texans pull this upset here?
I thought long and hard about this. I'd love to give you a non-cliche answer. I'd love to tell you.
Tell me to force some turnovers, explosive play and special teams.
But I can't even give you a cliche answer. All right, let's start with the biggest cliches that you say. This is your go-to on a Wednesday in a media session. Well, first it starts with stopping the run. Well, we're the worst in the league on yards per carry, except for, I don't know, maybe the Lions at this point or something, or the Chargers. So that's not going to happen. Let's see, protecting the passer. My God. The tackles are doing all right. The interior defensive line is just an absolute disaster right now. Interior offensive line is just a disaster right now. And you got a couple of journeymen at center and right guard, but Kenyon Green, the left guard, he's shown some promise. He's very much in that stage right now where he's trying to learn when he can be physical like he was in college and when he has to play with finesse. And I think in a lot of times right now, he's not doing either. So that's working against him. It's going to have to be somehow they muster some kind of a run game, not to set up the play action or anything, but just simply to get to second and 6 and 3rd and 3, and then some kind of rhythm and timing pass game where they've been able to pull it off. Versus the Raiders a couple of weeks ago, they did it and they were able to kind of march on down the field. But that's the Raiders' pass defense. That's not the Eagles right now. I'm not like I can usually talk myself into a team having a chance at winning a game. It's really, really hard here. The only hope I would give people is that the Texans do have an ability to stick around and keep it close. They are a bend, but ultimately play pretty good red zone defense and not break completely. So these games have been closer. So if you're a gambler, you can talk yourself into taking the Texans with the points. But as far as actually competing to win the game, the score was 3-0 last week at one point, 7-3 at one point, and it felt like the Texans might as well be getting beat by 21 points.
They're a bend and then break defense.
There you go.
They'll bend and they'll bend and they'll bend, and then eventually it'll just snap and it'll all go to hell. But it'll take a while to get there.
They've allowed the second fewest passing touchdowns in the NFL.
Oh, there you go.
And part of that is because teams just say, "Well, okay, why would we bother passing?" But they do get down into the red zone, and I think that's where you can see the strength of the team on defense is the secondary. And all of a sudden when you get into the red zone, geometry is your friend in the defensive backfield, and those guys take on more significance. So the defense becomes better. Significantly, just because the better guys on their team have a bit of an advantage. So that's the hope I can give you is that if you're putting money on this game, there would be a good reason to go with the Texans.
So we've been asking all of our guests in this midweek slot to make a pick for the game. We almost got there. It's 14 points right now. The Eagles are favored. Are you taking the Texans with the points, or are the Eagles actually still going to cover that?
The Texans, let's see, if I'm going through in my mind, I believe it's got to be 6 of the last 7 games now. They've been within, they've either been tied or had the lead at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Something close to that because they keep it close. So I would take the Texans with the points. They could easily lose by 10 without even a garbage touchdown at the end, and yet still be nowhere close to winning the game. It's an anomaly of a fun time there in the second half of a Texans game.
Really quick. So last week, Davis Mills saved his best 2 throws for garbage time, which was part of the reason why they had that last touchdown. Really quick, Davis Mills, is he going to be the starting quarterback next year for the Texans?
I don't think so. If he is, it's only because they're trying to get Bryce Young or whomever else they end up drafting ready. I think there's a chance. I don't like to look. We all love the Geno Smith experience this year. You don't want to count anybody out too prematurely, but it's not looking good for him right now.
I'm going to take the Eagles even at a 2-touchdown lead. Where are you going, Steven?
How did I finish last week, Sam?
Bad. Not good.
So I went, Seth, I've been so bad.
I know, you did the opposites.
Yeah,
and it still didn't work.
By the way, it's always good to have, a listener like Seth on the show, which is great. So I'm going to go back to my own takes again because they're all bad now. Everything's bad. I'm taking the Eagles to win by like 3 scores here. 3 touchdowns. The Eagles are definitely going to cover the 14.
Yeah,
they are. I'm warning you guys. They are plucky in a way that has nothing to do with actually winning football games.
I'm a sucker.
You got 5 wins last week. Even you needed Monday Night Football to get you to 5.
See, now it's the time of the season I can start going with my.
So you're going to Eagles?
I'm ready. Yeah, I'm going Eagles here.
All right, Seth. I need to ask you this before we let you out of here. I found a picture of you on the internet that has to be like rookie year Jags Seth Payne.
Yeah.
You're one of those few people that I've seen in the past that has that neck wider than their head thing. First of all, have you been like comparing training notes with Davis Mills? Is this like a club that you guys have? Or secondly, just what is the secret to having this giant Takeo Spikes neck going on?
The neck flexion machine. Like that's nice. All it is. It's pure and simple. There's a machine that you basically, it's like an old school Nautilus machine. Some of them have chains, some of them are weighted plates, and you hit that hard. And a lot of guys kind of slack their way through it. but if you hit that
You did
really,
it.
really hard, because I used to get stingers a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So I had a freakishly large neck, which I was proud of at the time. And now I just look at it as one big mound of sleep apnea. So I hope I never have a neck like that again. It doesn't matter. Sleep apnea will hit you whether it's muscle or fat. It does not discriminate.
It seemed the neck seemed to diminish throughout your career. Like rookie year, Seth Payne's neck was a sight to behold. And then by the time we got to the Texans, it was like, there's a neck there, but it's not what it used to be. He's let it slide.
Part of that is, I think bowing up for the picture itself. When you come from, so when you come out of Cornell, you've got some scouts and coaches and everything that are going to kind of have a natural bias against you. They're going to wonder, like, all right, is this just some fancy pants kid or something? So you got to go the opposite direction and go full incognito on him.
Right.
And I mean Richie incognito. So, which is, ironically, that means very conspicuous. So you got to go very conspicuous incognito on him and get in fights in training camp. My rookie year, I was getting in fights every other day.
Oh, Tom Coughlin must have loved that. Coughlin loves that stuff. Look at this kid from Cornell. He's feisty. He's a fighter.
You know what? Coughlin loved that until here's a good Jacksonville story for you, Steve.
Yeah.
Coughlin loved that until Marcus Stroud got in a fight in 2001 in his rookie training camp. And he broke his hand on a friend of mine, Mark Banowitz's face. He punched Mark Banowitz in the face, broke his hand, and he ended up being out for a good amount of time. And then from that moment forward, like Coughlin kind of stopped being so old school. I think, Coughlin was kind of a guy like an old Marine instructor that wanted guys to be right on the edge. Changed after that.
All of a sudden was like, it's come to my attention that people can get hurt during fights. They're totally off the table now.
Yeah, if the Cornell kid gets into a fight, fine. But it's my first-round pick, Marcus Stroud, so let's can that.
Dude, Mark Banowitz was a big guy himself. He went to Syracuse, and he was like 6'7", real broad-shouldered guy. But for training camp that year, we had done something that I thought was really a humanitarian move. We usually shaved guys' heads. Marcus had a real nice set of braids, so he begged us not to shave his hair. So, and Gary Walker was probably the guy who was actually in charge of shaving the hair. So Gary said, all right, we'll shave your eyebrows instead. And Marcus agreed to it. So Marcus, Marcus is a huge human being. So Banowitz is squared off against Stroud out there in training camp. And Stroud had got Banowitz's helmet off. And Banowitz said he was just looking at Stroud with no eyebrows, and his eyes wide, looking like he was about to devour him. And Banowitz just like, oh, man, I do not want to be here right now. But he fared all right.
That's amazing. I love it. We'll have to have a full late 90s Jaguar show again when Sam leaves. And, we'll have a lot of fun.
Thank God for that caveat.
Seth Payne, Sports Radio 610 over in Houston. Good luck to the Houston Astros. A ton of luck to the Houston Texans against the Eagles. You're taking the Texans to cover that 14, huh?
Texans to cover. Oh, and Seth Payne show on YouTube. I'm doing the YouTube.
There you go.
Oh, nice. Seth Payne. Yeah. What else? Yeah. What else do you want to plug? Do it all right now. Seth Payne show.
I guess my Twitter at Seth C Payne, and then my YouTube channel, which has 3 videos right now. Seth Payne show.
That's great. Well, if you're going to do some late 90s Jaguars on your YouTube channel, I'm happy to relive the glory days.
Steve, honestly, have me on to talk. Those guys, there were some personalities on those teams. Tony Bracken's one of my all-time favorite personalities. And nobody would ever know it because he was very private and very quiet, but he was an incredibly unique human being, is an incredibly unique human being. But, I could tell you some good stories.
Love it. Well, appreciate you being part of the show here today, Seth. And, we'll definitely do it again sometime.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Go Stros. And Texans, too.
Yes.
Go Houston. In general. So there we go, Seth Payne, and our first time with late 90s Jaguars on here.
It's good work.
Exciting.
Yeah, that was a good start for the late 90s Jag season that we're probably
We'll work our way up. We'll work our way up to Baselli and
now you can show, now you can show Mark Brunell that see, look, the other guys from your team, they're, they've given it a shot. It's not the worst thing in the world. I'm not just a crazy stalker. Have a show,
Yeah, I'm not just a crazy guy.
No,
with a Brunel jersey from 98.
Can we put up that picture of Seth on the screen? The giant necked Seth Payne from his rookie, what I assume was his rookie season.
Do that, and then I'll tell you where the PFF NFL podcast, what it's powered by today. and then we'll get into Sam throwing baseball.
Well, you can probably do the ad read, give Tyler a chance to get the picture.
Let's do that. Let's tell people that the PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Well, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance investment and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. Fun show today. There he is.
Look
There's
at that.
Big neck.
Monstrous neck. I mean, the Richie Incognito thing is a good call out. Like Richie Incognito had a neck like that. Just this.
It is also interesting how he's like out of Cornell and is like, I'm fighting these stereotypes. I'm tough.
Makes sense.
You know, I'm not just
It's
some
all just
Ivy leaguer.
all just the neck machine, just the cranking it.
That might be all they had at Cornell is the thing.
Just a neck machine.
You know,
we got one power rack and a neck machine. That's all you got.
All right. Some people already know the results of what happened.
I mean, anyone that looked on Twitter, for example.
Yeah. So people might already know the results. There's a baseball that you have right there, the Major League Baseball. We have it labeled with the what exactly happened.
Larry from the Reds hooked us up with the stadium.
Yes.
Albeit the bullpen was what we were using.
But the stadium looked beautiful. I mean, it was just
so beautiful that we weren't
nice.
allowed anywhere near the grass.
Yeah, couldn't touch the grass. But it was Great American Ballpark looked great. Appreciate Larry from the Reds setting this whole thing up.
Absolutely.
But if we're ready, we ready for the video? Are we going to be able to hear the video?
I don't know. Oh, there you go. Yes.
All right. So we can do, and we'll do an outro. We'll do it after this. So let's check it out. Let's see if this is Sam trying to throw 60 miles an hour.
Those temperatures just a little bit, though, on the cooler side out there. So here we are. Basically, what you see is what you're going to get the next few days around here. Lots of sunshine and temperatures that are still a little cooler than they should be, now for the first full week of October. So let's talk about outside right now. We've got perfectly blue skies. And
all right, the day is finally here. We've talked about this for a while. This is months in the making. Can Sam throw 60 miles an hour? Special thanks to the Cincinnati Reds. That's right, the Reds let us onto the stadium. Dirt only. We're not touching that beautiful grass right there, but they let us into the bullpen, Sam, to see if you throw 60.
Yeah, I got my throwing coach ready. Apparently I got a glove. Been warming up with a rugby ball.
It's a nice glove right there.
Yeah, it's yours.
Spalding special. Shout out to Spalding, my glove sponsor.
This is the second attempt at throwing a baseball. Of course, I was just in a park with the radar gun to see where we were. But we're doing this. We've already raised over $2,500 for Needs Inc., who supply service dogs for people in need who don't have $40,000 to $60,000 that apparently you need for one. So a big thank you to everyone that's donated. Keep on going. We're going to add money to it depending on what our final number is with this thing. That's baseball.
All right, let's do it. We're going to the bullpen. We'll get a few warm-ups in. Right. Get a few warm-ups and then see how fast Sam can throw.
Somebody told me that Nolan Ryan warmed up with a football. I don't own a football, but I own a rugby ball, and if you combine that with what the Giants receivers are doing right now, it feels like it must be 200% worth of warm-up. So this is how we're going.
I'm a little nervous. I know, I heard Sam was closing in on 60. We have two guns here, so it increases his odds a little bit. And his confidence is hurting my confidence a little bit, so I think he might do it.
I think he's got it. I've been giving him some pointers past few days, telling him to ice the arms, stretch it out a little bit. I think he's getting 63.
They gave us a fresh, new Major League ball for this.
63 miles an hour.
60 miles per hour here. You think it could happen?
At 57. 57 is where I'm going.
It's a question of what you're going to wear. Steve was like, the last thing you want is a big, long sleeve, billowy thing. It's going to drag wind resistance, right? Now, I didn't have like a long sleeve Under Armour or whatever, so what's the next best thing? Dave, what is it? What is it? Full sleeveless. I'm going to cut out all the drag here. Now look, I thought about shaving.
Zach Taylor should take
out all the wind resistance, but that felt like a bridge too far.
So this is the real deal.
Yeah. Are you ready? I told you, Gardner. You ready to go?
Yeah, you want to squat?
What the hell different? Just be there.
disturbing consistency. That's true. You look at the football. They use the throwing coach and the major league ball. We're already way past the, Conor McGregor over there and standing somewhere. I can get it right on you. Just not at 60 yet. Let's see what the floor coach tells me. That's next. All right. Major league. You're a professional. That already feels better. All right, ready? Any word for that? Get a picture of that number on your sheet.
Yeah, you did it. Yeah, you hit 60. You're sitting at 54 the entire time.
Yeah, it was a little worrying for a while.
Jacked it up to 58 a couple times.
Yeah.
And then the Major League ball.
And then the Major League ball, bam, we hit 60, and then immediately stopped because nothing better can happen. So, yeah,
I'm impressed.
Guaranteed. Hit it.
You did it.
I guarantee. My actual words were, I guarantee that the first number will be a 6. It might be the only,
turns out
any higher than a 6.
Turns out you're better at baseball than I anticipated.
Yeah.
You made contact against me last year. Threw 60 this year. What's your next feat of strength?
Well, I can't trash talk baseball too much because the nice guy from the Reds is standing over there, and he let us in here and stuff. Yeah. So I'll think about how to malign your sport for the next podcast we do. But I'm happy. We've guaranteed 60. This is really what it is.
I'm disappointed.
I mean, whatever. You've dismissed my obvious athletic gifts for a while. But this is mud in the eye for all the people that were guessing 42, 45. That's what this is.
Yeah, the 40s was always ridiculous. But I thought, 54 to 58 seemed like the right number. I was on for a while, but you warmed up, you got to 60, and I got to give you credit.
There were a lot of low 50s. Gordon McGinnis at 53, and I would blow out my shoulder today. That was his guess. But
look at you, still standing.
Credit to Dave Solfaro here, the guy that helped set all this up. He always believed in me. He was motivating me the whole way. And this is, Dave, this is for you. This is for you right here, 60. That's what it is.
That's all I got. You did it. So there we go. You did it.
Hit 60.
Congratulations. Hit 60 and quit. That was it.
Yeah.
That's it.
There might have been more in there, but frankly, as soon as the first number was a 6, I was done.
I'm proud of you. I doubted you. I thought you'd be low 50s. And you were for
quite a while.
For a lot of the time.
I was a little bit concerned by the consistent cadence of 54 that was coming back for a while.
Yeah.
That was worrying for a period, and then we bounced to 58. Because you were pointing out,
it's tough to go.
It's a pretty big leap to go from 54 to 60. So when we hit a few of them in a row, I was a little bit concerned until we hit 58. And it's like, all right, I already knew I could hit 58. So finally, that was still back there. And then it felt like, 58 to 60 is achievable.
You really owe it to Larry from the Reds, who brought the Major League ball for you.
100%.
That's
what did it.
Seams are a little bit tighter.
Yeah.
On that. You throw a little bit harder.
It did feel better, other than the first one, which went pretty wayward.
And there it is. That's the Major League ball. We wrote on it the day that Sam threw 60 miles an hour. And
we signed it, which turns out is harder than you think it is. In addition to pitching being harder than you think it is, just signing a ball is harder than you think it is.
Yeah, you think it's easy just signing a round baseball all the time.
Tricky, and it's got
all the autographs I had to sign through the years, writing on that round object.
It's got some grip to it. It doesn't, pen doesn't glide over the ball. It's tricky.
Oh, there's an art to it. There's an art to it. But congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody who made this happen. We do this for fun, but we do it for charity as well.
Where are we at? We have to figure out who's. We owe money to this thing between us somehow. What are we giving? We decided heading into that we were going to give like $100 for either any mile an hour over under. And
I'll throw in 100. I'll throw in.
So we'll both hit 100 because we both hit it.
We'll both throw in 100 here.
We're at 26.55 right now.
Beautiful.
So the link will be in this description. It's still my pinned tweet on Twitter at PFF_Sam. We're at $2,655. I am going to be harassing people that predicted numbers in the 40s, demanding money be donated to this thing for the insult that was given.
You're like a player that searches his name after the game.
Yeah. I'm going to find anybody that argued or claimed that I would only hit in the 40s and demand that they donate a significant amount of money.
Yeah. Well, congrats, man.
It was fun, though.
How did your pitching mechanics look from afar? How did you feel about watching yourself?
So I feel that the actual throwing part looked okay. It's the awkward, quirky my wind-up looked like Charles Barkley's golf swing, where he's like, there's like pausing midway through it.
Now you can see why I had doubts that you would hit 60.
Sure. Yeah. That's what my the leg work looked like that. There's like a pause and then a hitch and a pause. But once I was actually pot committed to the throw, I feel like the throwing mechanics looked okay. You're the pitching coach.
There's more in there.
From the shoulder up. Yeah. How did it look? Because forget the leg stuff.
I mean, it was all right. I mean, there's maybe something to work with. You might have 10 more miles an hour in you, is the thing.
But it reinforces my opinion that the people that airmail a ceremonial first pitch into the bleachers or under the
Well, like I said, you airmailed a couple.
But also
you just never know which one's going to be the one.
But I airmailed a couple trying to hit 60 when we were just warming up. Yeah, I think every one of those hit you right in the head.
Your accuracy was good.
Every one of those warm-up ones was straight down the middle.
I was impressed. I'm impressed with your baseball skills now. I know we know that you can throw 60, and we know that you can hit my low 70s mile an hour fastball straight up into the air.
Yes.
We know those two things.
Well, straight up into the air and off to right field a bit when it's a warm-up before they turn the cameras on.
There's already one suggestion for the next charity drive, doing something football-related, whether it's field goals, whatever it is. Somebody in the chat said, I'd rather see Sam run inside zone as part of the scout team. So... I mean, I think we should talk to the Bengals about
how much they would like to injure us.
Yeah, how the stuff that goes on Twitter, could the average human pick up 4 yards, on a carry or something like that. I feel like we need to throw me as the running back on a play.
Yeah, I mean, look, I generally am in favor of a concept that way of that description. On the other hand, I've seen the Bengals' offensive line this year. And
man, wow, look at you.
Do you want to take a carry behind that line?
No.
Give me the Eagles' offensive line.
Not full tackle either. We're playing thump, right?
I'll take an inside zone carry with the Eagles' offensive line blocking for me.
I'm more of a power counter type of runner, to be honest. I don't want to play inside zone. I don't have that one cut zone ability. No? I'm more downhill.
Anyway, we need suggestions is what we're saying here. So NFL Podcast at PFF.com. Give us suggestions for both the charity we can donate to the next time and what the hell is we're going to do for the next time. I like the idea of the field goal competition. I also like the idea of expanding that a little bit and making it multi-sport. We could have a field goal kick. We could have drop kicks with a rugby ball. We could have soccer penalties, the whole
a competition
shebang.
Here.
Yeah.
We should go back to maybe a competition for multiple charities. Yeah. So we got some other stuff in the works. But again, we appreciate everybody that's donated to not just this charity, but all of the ones that we've had. We're not going to do Johnny Knoxville type of stuff. Let's take a kickoff against Tennessee football.
I mean, look, I'm willing to experience a certain volume of pain, but.
I'm not. I'm too old. 4 kids.
There's a certain volume.
Thumping.
But Johnny Knoxville, got himself like blown to oblivion by taking on a cow head on head. Like that guy was knocked out cold for like 20 minutes, and like, I don't want that.
No, we don't need that. Somebody's asking me to saying I should pass rush against Tony Baselli.
That would be funny.
He's older than me, by the way. I'm not the same age as Tony Baselli.
He's older and he doesn't have any knees anymore. Is it the knees that did him in?
No, so maybe I've got a chance.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, probably not, but.
No, I've got no chance. All right. Is that it for today?
Yeah, I believe we're done.
Great show, and appreciate Seth Payne being a part of it. Appreciate all of our sponsors, and of course, all the great work Tyler and Dave and everybody behind the scenes here doing everything they could to put together the video. And Larry from the Reds, and letting us have some fun over at Great American. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow breaking down all of the Week 9 NFL action.